we were quite engrossed in what we were doing over there, and I don't think we did think a lot about England at all, really. It's a strange sort of thing, but when you're in the forces, you develop a terrific sort of comradeship, and you're like a family on your own, divorced from your own family, as it were. And I met some jolly fine blokes when I was in Normandy. One of my pals, he did actually tread on a mine, and he was blown up and blinded. I remember that very clearly.
What happened, Jack?
Well, he was walking along one of the fields at the back of Vers-sur-Mer, and it was a mine there, and he trod on it, and he was blown up, and the net result, he wasn't actually severely injured physically in his body, but he lost his sight. He was blinded. An Irish chap, and he sent back to England. But that was the only casualty that we had in our unit. Shortly after the breakout, when up at Falaise, we heard of the Falaise Gap, where the Americans and the British linked up. We went up there, and we drove through Caen on the way up to Falaise, and because we were in Air Force blue uniforms, the French civilians weren't very pleased to see us, and quite a lot of them were shaking their fists at us, because nearly 10,000 civilians were killed in the bombing of Caen by the RAF, because it was a German strong point for a long time. And then when we got up to Falaise itself, well, that was something else. Oh, it's just well, the smell of death was unbelievable. Miles of burnt out tanks and burnt out vehicles and dead horses and dead cows, dead men. Oh, it was really horrific. It's something I've never forgotten and never will forget. No, it was pretty horrific.
There was quite a lot of fighting there, wasn't there?
Oh yes, well that's when they surrounded the Germans, you see. And the Americans and the British linked up there. And well, they practically wiped the German army out there. Well, certainly destroyed a lot of it. Some of it managed to get away, but it was the beginning of the end for the Germans, I'm sure. It's very hard to explain, but it was that feeling of terrific comradeship that one had. You know, blokes would, everybody would do anything for anybody, and you just don't get that in civilian life. But we got it there, and it was terrific. And I mean, I always remember one of my best pals, a chap called Yorkie, came from Sheffield, and he'd been a milkman in Civvy Street. And he was a wonderful guy. He'd do anything for anybody, and that's the sort of thing that you just don't get in civilian life. And it's very hard, unless you've been there and actually experienced it. It's even very hard to describe it. But that's as it was. I was interviewed by an officer there, and he tried to talk me into staying in the Air Force. I was even offered a commission in the RAF regiment, and I said no, I'm going out. And I made up my mind I wasn't going to stay in. And we were duly taken down to the clothing store where we were fitted out with horrible suits and trilby hats and a raincoat and a pair of shoes, and they took away our uniform and gave us this other gear to wear, and that was it. We walked out of there in these awful civilian clothes, got on a train, came home. That was it.
And shortly after, you blew a lot of money on a car, didn't you?
Oh, well, yes, after the war, yes. Well, I had inherited a little bit of money from my grandfather, and after a while, I settled back into. I went back into our family business to work, and I had this bit of money, and I blew it. I should have bought a house, but I didn't. I bought a nice ridey Kestrel instead. And that was it. That was it. But it took a bit of time settling down to civilian life again, I must say. But of course, I was alongside. We lived in a block of flats, and there was a lot of guys in these flats who'd all been not in my outfit, but they'd all been in the forces. So we all had a sort of thing in common. And we all used to go up to the local pub and reminisce with one another, and gradually it all faded away. I was very lucky to have been there and to have survived it, because the powers that be were certainly not thinking, not bargaining on being such a fewer number of casualties as there were. I mean, and some of the units, they were providing almost for 50% casualties. And to think that one survived, one went through it all and survived it without anything unforeseen happening to them. I was very lucky. And very lucky to have witnessed the bravery of our troops and to see the boys in action as I did. It was a privilege.